Hello, everyone. It is so good to be back in Korea for another Korea Blockchain Week. I want to thank Erica and everyone for throwing this. Last time I was here was 2019, and it's amazing to see how things have grown. I landed about late last night, so apologies if I start slurring my words in terms of jet lag. But today, I want to talk a little bit about it is the next era of growth tools with how we can use some of these inventions and innovations we have with Web3. But what I kind of want to get out more is I think the way that we're actually going to see mass adoption, kind of where Web3 is going over the next few years, I don't think we're going to get mass adoption by launching more crypto native projects and having big institutions adopt them. I think the mass adoption is already in process. And it's a bit more subtle than we think. And so I'm going to get into a little of where I see that going and what I'm building. So just a little bit of background. I'm from New York City, now based in Hong Kong. I was on the original Stacks core team, not the founder, which I think it said somewhere. That's Manib. But I now run a company in Hong Kong on top of Stacks called Daemon Technologies. We do a bunch of venture funding, partnerships, and also community growth in Asia for the protocol. I also have another startup with a few co-founders called Conductive. We are making SaaS tools for Web3, so Web3 growth and marketing tools. So just to kind of get us all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about, this is kind of what I think of in terms of the stack that enables Web3. I think there's many other ways you can describe this or slice it. So, I don't necessarily take this as canon, but, I think the basic concept that this really starts with is open and permissionless ownership. Once you're able to have that in the digital world, you can then layer the ability to transfer that ownership or value that ownership on top of it. That allows you to have digital end-to-end economies, which are created via incentive structures. And then you have the actual assets themselves, which are essentially the unit of this ownership and of the incentives. And it's on top of this stack, the idea at least is that we have dApps, Web3, and all this kind of new incredible world of Web3. But so, why haven't we quite gotten there yet if that's the case and we think that's where we're going? I would claim a huge part of it is this. And I don't think this is the worst thing, frankly. I'm not surprised by it, but I think we've spent as a space a little too much time over the past few years, certainly more recently, on launching tokens. And I think that can be good, and I get why. When you have an innovation that allows you to do global permissionless fundraising at the click of a button and raise a lot of, that's a 0-to-1 innovation, and that's not going anywhere. Obviously, we're putting better practices around it. But, in most cases, the problem with all the focus being on launching tokens, and apologize for all the text here, but most of these applications, the token is not the product. The blockchain infrastructure is not the product. What these people have created is they've essentially created a project where they're trying to use the method of monetization and bootstrapping as the product. Now, this is not the case with something that is fundamentally financial. So, for instance, MakerDAO is a good example. That is an actual product that is heavily financial, and so there is actually a product there. But certainly for a lot of things that have been launched over, I'll say the last 2 years, in many cases, what they're actually missing is a product. And because of that, you end up with issues, for instance, projects with Ponzonomics for their token, and you ultimately end up not getting any adoption because people are in it just to get rich if there's no product. This text by Benedict Evans is actually pretty amazing. Encourage anyone who is unfamiliar with him to look him up on Twitter. Him and I used to chirp at him a bit because I don't think he really got Web3, but he's come around, and I think he brings up some great points about how Web3 needs to start being used, and we'll get into that now. So again, I'm not surprised by this. We're following the typical adoption curve of technology. I think right now we're probably somewhere between the early adopters and early majority stage, but I can't tell you how many times I've been at a conference and a speaker has told me we're in 1995 and then 3 years later said the same thing. So don't take this as exact, but it's to be expected. So that being said, if this is to be expected, how can we speed up this evolution of the mass adoption of Web3 and getting a lot of not just users, but also companies and just the economy in general to really adopt and buy into this stuff? So I think we have to lean into what the real innovation is here. If the internet if the fundamental innovation of the internet in some ways is that anyone can create and distribute any bit of information globally at the push of a button, the innovation we now have layered on top of that is that same individual can now prove ownership over that bit of information, and a global open market can put a price on it and trade it 24/7. And so when you have this layered, I think that is really the stack that allows software to eat the world. And in a lot of cases, these are kind of some of what I think about in terms of what it enables. It really, especially for projects that are more ecosystems, they are now end-to-end economies. It really switches the thinking from a single company that has revenue to something more similar to an open economy that has a GDP. I think crypto is amazing for bootstrapping the supply side of a market. What I'll say to explain that, the example I love the most is when you have a cell tower network. When you only have one tower, it's not valuable to anyone. There's no demand for that. When you have two, there's not. You have to get to a critical amount of towers, thousands, before that supply is any value to the demand side of the market. How do you incentivize that to happen? Well, the only way we've been able to do it in the past is basically top-down coordination from governments, basically paying someone to do that. We can now incentivize that with an open token incentive structure. Bootstrapping supply side is one of the things that these tools do very well. We can also now monetize digital commons. This, I think, is also extremely powerful. And what it's closely tied to is also the ability to much more directly now monetize both community access, activity, and culture. We'll quickly go through, how I see kind of the tools that we use to create this. And, fungible tokens, I think it's really blood cells. The atomic unit of incentivization is basically how I look at it. NFTs are kind of the atomic unit of ownership or credential. And NFTs, I actually think we're just getting started with. If you think about how essential NFTs that we don't call NFTs are to the physical world, everything is going to be an NFT. But I think the ways to use them as tools also get quite a bit more interesting. And then finally, tokenomics is basically the science of how you put those things together in order to create the right mix of incentives to drive a desired outcome. And this is, one of the things I think that we need to do in taking the focus off of just launching tokens is actually, think deeply and try a lot more experimentation in terms of both when tokens are launched and what the tokenomics look like. The reason being that this is a completely new interdisciplinary area of expertise, and there are no experts, in my opinion, at least today. And I think we've kind of started to see this adoption and where this is going. So again, these tools, the way that I think we actually start to see adoption going forward from here with these tools is, I think by the time we have the next run, however many years that is from now, crypto will already kind of be mass adopted in many ways. And what I mean by that is every platform we use and interact with online will have an NFT support in it. It'll have fungible token support. They'll just support the assets at first, but that's all you need. And that way, when the next run actually happens, My parents will probably have access to NFTs or be using systems that make use of them in some way under the radar. This is, I think we've all seen this. This is just accelerating as the market has gone down aggressively. Like, market price doesn't matter for this type of adoption, and this is happening more and more. The reason, again, is because tokens, for instance, and incentive structures with crypto are amazing at monetizing the activity that is adjacent to your brand online, but is maybe not actually directly captured by it. And I think you're gonna see a lot more of this. Where this goes, though, that gets really interesting is it's also gonna redefine the relationship of the user with these brands. And that's gonna start when they have these assets supported. Data, I think, obviously becomes interoperable, user-owned. You actually get a user that gets to be on the supply side of that market. Wallets are already starting to be used as cookies, and that, I think, is only going to accelerate as Web 2.5 adopts this more and more. And yeah, I think this is really just talking to how it's going to fundamentally change the relationship between the user and the platform. And I think that'll happen before any of these platforms become open source networks or protocols themselves. So briefly, this is just the two ways I'm involved in the space. So again, I was on the early Stacks core team. Stacks enables Web3 everything that you can do on something like Ethereum or Solana, but where it settles down to Bitcoin. If you stake Stacks tokens, you don't earn more Stacks tokens, you earn native Bitcoin itself. And we have some pretty cool abilities with smart contracts to let them actually control native Bitcoin addresses, taproot addresses, which gives you the ability to do things like lend, borrow, swap natively with BTC, not a wrapped version. Also allows you to do things like mint, buy, sell NFTs with actual just Bitcoin. And then I also have a company, as I mentioned earlier, Conductive. So basically, it's user insights, user acquisition, user retention for Web3. We're a SaaS company, so we don't make any smart contracts. There's no tokens, nothing like that. We actually just help you understand your economy and help you get a better sense of what the actual ROI on things like marketing spend are. And yeah, that's about it for me. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erica and the organizers. Have a good one.